The United States has sold the F-35 to nearly 20 countries. Almost 1,300 of them are flying right now, from the Arctic Circle down to the Mediterranean, from the Baltic across to the Pacific. Not one of those nations actually owns their jet, not fully. Not even after the check clears, not even after they paint their own flag on the tail. March 2025, all of Europe froze over a single rumor. Somewhere inside every F-35, there's a hidden switch. One finger on the other side of the ocean presses down, and a $100 million machine turns into a pile of scrap aluminum on the runway. Does that kill switch actually exist, or does the United States hold something else? Something with no button at all, something far more dangerous. One ally found out the hard way, not in combat, on a runway, on American soil. This is future war tech. Today, we find out what's really holding those jets in place. Chapter 1. The Kill Switch Myth. The rumor didn't start in Moscow. It didn't start in Beijing either. It started in Germany, March 2025, with a communications director at Hensoldt, a German defense electronics firm and a direct competitor to the F-35 program. He dropped one line to the press, and that line caught fire. The kill switch in the F-35 is more than just a rumor. Within weeks, it had spread across the entire continent. Belgian papers, Swiss papers, British papers, German papers. Then, it crossed the Atlantic into Canada. Weigh that fear for a second. If it were true, 20 nations, most of them NATO allies, would have handed over their entire air power to one finger on the other side of an ocean. A $100 million machine reduced to scrap with a single line of code. March 18th, the Pentagon's Joint F-35 Program Office answered, cold and short. No kill switch exists. But here's the part that actually matters. It wasn't Washington's denial that stood out. It was who else was denying it, the supposed victims themselves. Belgium's Chief of Defense, General Frederick van Sina, told his own country's press, there's no indication this is even possible. The F-35, he said, is not a remote-controlled aircraft. The Czech Ministry of Defense put out its own statement, flat out saying no one can reach into the jet from a distance. Switzerland said the same thing. Their aircraft fly on their own. Nobody in Washington is flying them by remote. So, case closed? Everyone can breathe easy? Not quite, because while all of Europe was busy hunting for a button, the US Air Force's own website had two lines sitting in plain sight. First, this entire support operation is funded 100% by the countries it serves: the UK, Australia, Norway, Italy, Denmark, the Netherlands, Japan, Korea, Israel, Poland, Belgium. Second, those same countries are not permitted to run independent test operations outside the continental United States. That's US policy. So there it is. They foot the entire bill, and they're not allowed to take the work home. Why is Washington so confident it doesn't need a hidden switch to keep the upper hand? Because buried in that same March interview, the scariest line from that Hensoldt spokesman got skipped over by almost every outlet that ran the story. He wasn't just talking about a kill switch, he was warning about something else entirely. But it's much easier to do it using the mission planning system. Then the plane just stays on the ground. The mission planning system. What is that exactly? What kind of system can ground a stealth fighter without anyone ever laying a hand on the airframe? Nobody followed up. Nobody asked what that system actually was. We're going to ask. Chapter 2. Mission Data File. The dictionary that teaches the F-35 how to see. The F-35 carries the most sophisticated sensor suite ever bolted onto an airframe. But the F-35 doesn't actually see its enemy. It only picks up raw energy pulses, bare strings of numbers with no color, no name attached. On its own, it can't tell a civilian weather radar from a surface-to-air missile locking onto it. To know the difference, the F-35 has to check something called the Mission Data File, a library of electromagnetic signatures. Thousands of radar fingerprints hunted down over years, sorted, cross-checked, and compressed into a single data block. Think of it as the dictionary that teaches the jet how to translate noise into a named threat. Now, walk through the sequence an F-35 has to complete before it's ever cleared to fire. The sensor listens, the library translates, the computer locates, the pilot fires. 4 links. That's the entire kill chain, the pipeline running from detection to trigger. Those 4 links have to fire in order. So what happens if you pull that dictionary out? The sensor still listens, the missile still sits ready, but the chain snaps right in the middle. No name, no lock. No lock, no shot. The $100 million fighter keeps flying, sleek as ever, but the pilot goes completely blind to every threat around him, in total silence, right up to the moment a real missile finds the airframe. So where does that dictionary actually get written? Not Brussels, not Tokyo, Canberra, or Ottawa, and not in some hidden facility either. A stretch of Florida coastline, Eglin Air Force Base, home of the U.S. Reprogramming Laboratory, run by the 513th Electronic Warfare Squadron, a roughly $300 million facility. No private contractor runs it. The mission data is produced by the U.S. government inside a lab. The United States has sold the F-35 to nearly 20 countries. Almost 1,300 of them are flying right now, from the Arctic Circle down to the Mediterranean, from the Baltic across to the Pacific, flying under the flags of almost 20 nations. They take off from runways half a world apart, and the way that data actually gets loaded is almost too simple to believe. That data block doesn't move by satellite. It doesn't ride some cutting-edge encrypted link. It gets loaded onto the aircraft before every flight on a portable hard drive. A $100 million machine, 3 decades of stealth technology, and its entire ability to tell friend from foe fits in the palm of a hand. Something a staff sergeant slips in a pocket, walks out to the flight line, plugs in, then pulls out and walks away with. And out of all 1,300 of those aircraft, there's exactly one country that has never had to wait for that hard drive to arrive: Israel. This isn't something the Allies failed to notice. Back in 2014, the partner nations put it on the table directly. They'd poured billions into the program. They wanted the source code, the right to write their own data for aircraft flying their own flag. A reasonable ask, and one they'd earned the standing to make. The Pentagon answered with a policy it has never broken for any American weapons system in its entire history. The source code doesn't get shared. No exceptions, no negotiation. The compromise that came out of it: no source code. But partners could have their own labs and write data for their own fleets. Listen closely to where those labs actually sit. Australia's, Canada's, and the UK's at Eglin. Norway's and Italy's at Eglin. Japan's, South Korea's, and Israel's at Point Mugu, California. All of them on American soil, behind an American fence, under American eyes. The Allies came asking for the keys to the house. What they got was a desk. And even that desk isn't handed to everyone. Top tier, the United States with its own lab. Middle tier, a small group invited to the table: Australia, Canada, the UK, Norway, Italy, Japan, Israel. Bottom tier, And this is most of the nations flying the F-35. No table at all. They wait. They receive a file someone else already built. Even the update rhythm is its own kind of leverage. Colonel Larry Fenner, commander of the 350th Spectrum Warfare Wing, described the old process in one cold phrase: an industrial model, maybe annually or semi-annually. He wants it faster, and he's got good reason to. But when asked exactly how long the current cycle takes, he declined to say. Sensor data from the battlefield has to fly back to the United States. Engineers at the reprogramming labs pick it apart, figure out what's changed, decide what's significant enough to push into an update, then re-engineer it and send it back out to the front line. So your picture of the threat is only ever as current as the last update, no matter what the enemy changed last week. There's one more lock, and this one doesn't even live in the sky. Every F-35 is tied to a digital logistics system. First Alice, now replaced by Odin, an integrated operational data network. It tracks every flight hour, every bolt, every maintenance action. It knows which jet needs which part and where that part currently sits on the planet. And it decides one thing that sounds mundane, almost bureaucratic, and is absolutely lethal: whether this aircraft is airworthy today. The U.S. Government Accountability Office documented something worth sitting with. There were times when bad or missing data caused the system to flag an F-35 as unfit to fly, when the aircraft itself had nothing wrong with it at all. Solid airframe, solid engine, pilot already strapped into the seat, and a piece of paper said no. In the entire history of air combat, no weapon on Earth has ever shot down a fifth-generation stealth fighter. A blank field in a database can do it before the jet ever taxis. Put those two layers together and you get a control structure that needs no spy chip, no hidden command line, no button at all. Layer 1 decides what your aircraft can see. Layer 2 decides whether it leaves the ground. Both are public. Both sit written into a contract every party read and signed. In 2010, at the squadron's activation ceremony at Eglin, the lab's first commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Weld, summed it up in one line. With mission data, the F-35 is pure lethality. That wasn't a warning, that was a technical description. And if you think this is just a structure on paper, leverage that exists but nobody's ever actually pulled, it's already been pulled. Which means there's one more piece missing, and to find it, we have to go to the place where that lever was pulled once on one NATO member. Chapter 3. Turkey, Living Proof. 6 F-35As, built in 2018, painted in Turkish Air Force markings, tail numbers 18-0001 through 18-0005, and one more. These aren't mock-ups, they've flown. June 2018, the first one gets delivered. August 2018, a Turkish pilot climbs into the cockpit, pushes the throttle forward, and takes off over American skies. And that's the only sky those jets have ever known. 8 years later, all 6 aircraft still sit on American soil. Not one of them has ever been allowed to fly home. Don't mistake Turkey for some sideline customer. They were a founding partner. Ankara planned to buy around 100 F-35As. Turkish factories were building roughly 900 parts for the global program, meaning the F-35s flying over Norway, Japan, Israel today all carry pieces of steel forged in Turkey. They weren't just sitting at the table, they were cooking part of the meal. And they paid. Roughly $1.4 billion, wired, receipted, done. Then, in 2019, Ankara took delivery of its first shipment of a Russian air defense system, the S-400. The response took days. To understand why Washington drew this as an absolute line, you have to understand what the S-400 actually is. It's not a gun. It's a radar machine built to hunt stealth aircraft. The Pentagon's logic ran like a theorem. A Russian radar designed to find stealth jets cannot sit in the same network as the stealth jet itself. Here's the specifics. July 2019, a Russian transport plane lands at Merted Air Base, northwest of Ankara. From there, draw out the S-400's radar coverage, 370 miles. It blankets Istanbul, reaches the Black Sea coast, stretches all the way down to Incirlik, a U.S. air base. Inside that circle, the radar tracks 300 targets at once, sweeping without pause. Now put a squadron of Turkish F-35s inside that ring. Every sweep, the jet passes through the beam again. Radar signature, infrared signature, how it responds to each waveform, the kind of data an adversary would normally have to fight an entire war to collect. Here, it just flows in, during peacetime. And every bit of it sits inside a system built by Russia, maintained by Russia, running Russian software updates. This was never a fear about one spy. It was a fear about an ear, planted permanently, legally, right inside an ally's own house. Washington warned them. Ankara signed anyway. July 2019, Turkey gets removed from the F-35 program. December 2020, the U.S. slaps CAATSA sanctions on Turkey's defense procurement agency, making Ankara the first NATO member in history sanctioned under that law. Not one shot fired, not one American jet took off. Nobody touched a single piece of Turkish hardware. Washington simply closed the door. Turkish factories got cut from the supply chain. Those 900 parts went to other manufacturers. The $1.4 billion already paid, never refunded. And 6 jets, already painted with Turkish flags, sat in storage on American soil behind an American fence, exactly as designed. Then, July 2026, the file gets reopened. On the 7th in Ankara, on the sidelines of a NATO summit, the U.S. president announces he'll lift the KAAN sanctions. He says, simply, that America doesn't want to punish friends. The Turkish president, sitting beside him, says the jets have been promised. After 7 years frozen, those 6 fighters suddenly have a future. But listen closely to what happens next, because this is the real lesson almost nobody catches. That announcement didn't open the storage doors, because what's actually locking those 6 jets was never the sanctions. It's a separate law, the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act, which bars the U.S. from transferring F-35s to Turkey as long as Ankara possesses the S-400. And that law carries no exemption clause for a president to invoke. Lifting KAAN still has to go through Congress. 6 Republican lawmakers and 4 Democrats have already sent letters opposing it. And even if KAAN gets fully repealed, a second door stays shut until the S-400 batteries leave Turkish territory. The most powerful man in America stood in Ankara and said he'd certainly consider selling F-35s to Turkey. Turkish officials let slip that if the sanctions come off entirely, the first move would be the U.S. handing over those 6 stored jets directly to Turkey. But not yet. If the sanctions rested on one man's decision alone, this would be simple. A person can change his mind, can be persuaded, can soften over a handshake in Ankara. But what's actually holding those sanctions in place isn't a personal will. It's an architecture, law stacked on law, resolution stacked on resolution, barrier stacked on barrier. There's no single person left to appeal to. If even a president can't open that door, then who can? There's exactly one country on Earth that's never had to ask. Chapter 4. The one country that never waits. By now, someone's going to push back. Turkey brought this on itself. This would never happen to Japan, to Australia, to the Netherlands. Fair point, except the last 2 years have told a different story. Spain canceled its F-35 plans, pivoted to the Eurofighter and Europe's FCAS program, steering most of a €10.5 billion budget increase toward European suppliers. Portugal walked away from the deal entirely. Switzerland got tangled in a pricing dispute and put the whole thing back on the table. And Canada, after already signing for 88 jets, reopened the entire file. Not one of those countries bought a single piece of Russian hardware. Not one of them crossed the line. So what changed? The answer isn't political. It's a single line item on the risk assessment every defense procurement office on the planet has to fill out. Supplier dependency risk. And Canada is where you see it most clearly because there's a competitor sitting right at the table. Sweden's Saab stepped in with the Gripen, but what they brought to the negotiation wasn't speed and it wasn't stealth. Look closely at their pitch. Access to the mission system's source code, data sovereignty, the right to upgrade and maintain the aircraft themselves with no one else's approval needed, plus an assembly line built right on Canadian soil. Look at that list again, then hold it against everything we broke down in Chapter 2. Saab isn't selling a better jet. They're selling the absence of a leash. Every line in their pitch is a direct answer to a specific choke point in the F-35 program. That's not marketing, that's a mirror. But here's where honesty matters, or you're just lying to yourself. In Canada's original competition, the F-35 scored 95% on military capability. The Gripen scored 33. That's not a gap, that's a chasm. Choose sovereignty, you pay for it in capability. Choose capability, you pay for it in sovereignty. There's no free door here, and anyone telling you otherwise is selling you something. And out of the entire fleet of 1,300 jets, there's exactly one country that never has to pay either price: Israel. Time to correct a myth that keeps circulating even inside military circles. People say Israel was handed the F-35's source code. No, the Pentagon has never shared the source code of any American weapons system with anyone. That policy has never once been broken. What Israel actually has is more sophisticated than that. The F-35I Adir was built with its own dedicated software integration line, controlled by Israel, letting them load, update, and manage their own mission data, their own threat libraries, their own electronic warfare logic, their own communication protocols, their own weapons interfaces, without ever touching the core flight software the US controls. The Israelis didn't ask for the keys to the house. They asked to build their own room inside it, with their own door, their own lock. And they got a yes. That's why the Adir carries its own Python 5 missiles, its own Spice precision-guided bombs, its own electronic warfare systems. Maintenance is centered at Nevatim Air Base out in the Negev Desert. No waiting on a shipment crossing the Atlantic. 48 Adirs are flying today, and they're the only F-35s on the planet that write their own dictionary. 3 positions, 1 aircraft. Turkey lost everything. 6 airframes in storage, 8 years running. Most of the world can fly, can fight, and waits every morning for a hard drive to arrive from Florida. Israel writes its own, loads its own, upgrades its own. Same stealth skin, same engine, same production line in Fort Worth. The difference between those 3 fates was never in the steel, not the technology, not loyalty. And once Turkey understood that, they did something nobody saw coming. Chapter 5: The Way Out and the Deeper Trap. Israel built its own room because it was allowed to. Turkey got thrown out of the house. Getting pushed out of the F-35 program didn't leave Turkey sitting still. They poured everything into their own stealth fighter, KAAN. Turkish design, Turkish production. First flight, February 2024. And then came the twist nobody saw coming. July 2025, in Istanbul, Ankara signs a contract to sell 48 KAAN jets to Indonesia, priced around $10 billion, with technology transfer included, with an assembly line going up on Indonesian soil. In the statement Turkish Aerospace put out that day, they called it the largest export contract in Turkish history, and they underlined 4 words: built with national capability. The circle closes. A country once locked out by America's control machine now stands selling someone else the key to escape it. But look closely at what's inside the KAAN. The first airframes run on GE F-110 engines, built by General Electric in the United States. And an American engine needs one thing: a U.S. export license. For years, that exact license is what CAATSA sanctions choked off, strangling the very program Ankara built to escape dependency in the first place. The exit door, it turns out, had a lock bolted to its own hinge, and the one holding the key was the same country they were trying to run from. Turkey is racing to swap that engine for a domestic one, but until that's done, their most independent aircraft still breathes with American lungs, and they're not alone. South Korea's KF-21, the UK, Italy, Japan, GCAP program, France, Germany, Spain's FCAS. A whole wave rising at once, all chasing the same thing: the right to write the software for their own weapons. Except the current of warfare is running the other way. America's 6th-generation fighter, the F-47, will never fly alone. It flies like a conductor in the middle of a swarm of autonomous drones. The U.S. Air Force is targeting more than 1,000 of these drones, one pilot commanding an entire flock. And here's the detail worth sitting with. That program is being opened up to allies, with the stated goal of letting partner nations' F-35 fleets control those same drones, running on the same software architecture. The Netherlands already placed its first order for 2 back in April this year. This isn't a trap someone set on purpose. It's just the natural shape of the war that's coming. More network nodes, more links. More links, more dependency. For every side in the fight, including the United States itself, which is tying itself into a data network no one can stand fully outside of anymore. In the 20th century, air power was measured in steel. In the 21st, it's measured in the right to write. This is future war tech. See you at the next front in the tech war.